Hi folks, welcome to another episode of My Life with Robert Burns. Jim Thompson and Douglas Mackenzie here again to talk to one of our cronies from around the Burns world. Hi Jim.
Hi Douglas, hi everybody.
How you doing, Jim?
Doing absolutely fabulous. I'm
good.
That's all that matters, Douglas.
Our guest tonight is the chairman of the Old Manor Burns Supper and has been for many years. And he's just fresh from filming for the launch of a special project at the Globe Inn in Dumfries. Cronies everywhere, please welcome John Morgan.
Good evening.
Hi John, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. And thank you for having me along.
Good. John, if you've watched any of these podcasts, you'll know that our first question is always the same. Can you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, please hit me with a brick if I go on too long. Firstly, you'll see I'm in these beautiful surroundings of the Globe Inn. Well, I'm not actually, but I'm putting that up as a better background than the one I had. I started life in Glasgow. I was born in Glasgow, and I went down to Greenock when I was 3. My mother and father found me a couple of years later, and had a very happy life there. I went to the Greenock Academy. Very posh school, and not that that had any effect on what happened afterwards, but we had a great life in Greenock and I thoroughly enjoyed it. My father was a marine engineer and my grandfather before him was a marine engineer, and my uncles were as well, which will come back to another part of the story later on. We moved. My father could see the writing on the wall for shipbuilding on the Clyde. It was a real shame. He worked with a company called Rankin and Blackmore, and they made gas turbine engines. But he could see the writing on the wall, and he got made an offer by a gentleman that he knew in the Distillers Company Limited. And he went through to Alloa and took over the Abercrombie works, who made distilling equipment, the big copper stills and bottling hall machinery for the whisky industry. And therefore we got dragged out of Greenock and we chose Bridge of Allan, which was great because I lived in Bridge of Allan all my life until the rest of my life until about a year ago when I moved to Stirling, which was another interesting tale. So that was us in Bridge of Allan. And I started work as an office boy, getting on the bus at Bridge of Allan and going to Glasgow and back again. And that was quite a hike, I can tell you. I'd always been a wee bit of an artist. I liked drawing. My grandfather used to pick me up on a Thursday. I remember that, on a Thursday in his Morris Minor. And he bought me a new Bothwell drawing pad every Thursday. And I would sit in the car while he went round the chandlers and all the salesmen, because he represented a company that sold lifting equipment and all that stuff for shipping engineering. And I would sit outside doing all my drawing. In fact, I got a box over here in the place I am just now, which is full of my old Bothwell drawing pads. So I actually got better as years went on, which thank goodness. But that was going to be my idea, to be a cartoonist or to be someone like that. So I got the job in an advertising agency as an office boy. And the guy there was a chap called Tommy Shields, TVS Publicity it was. And he heard that my father was with the distillers and obviously thought he'd get some whiskey advertising out of it. They gave me a job. He didn't by any chance of that. So anyway, we enjoyed that time. I then spent the rest of my life up until a few years ago in advertising and marketing. And I ran advertising agencies and owned a couple in the process. But as the Irish say, if I was going there, I wouldn't start from here. So I wouldn't go into advertising if that was a choice again. I had some good times in it and I had some not so good times in it. All in all, it was a great experience. But there were lots of things that interested me other than that. I was a member of the Round Table in Bridge of Allan, which is one of these things that gets you into many social circles. And we started a Burns Supper. I can't even remember how we started it, but I think I did because I was asked to go along to a Burns Supper in Bridge of Allan, the Old Manor Burns Club, run by a delightful old chap, Archie Gourley. And Archie was getting on a wee bit. And I think about the second or the third Burns Supper I was doing with them, I was doing something. I was going to be the toast to the lassies, and I was going to do, in those days, the character of Russ Abbott, Jimmy McJimmy, and I had my tartan jacket and all the rest of it. And Archie collapsed before the burn supper started. We were all in reception and he collapsed and had to be taken away in an ambulance. And everybody was looking at each other and saying, what do we do now? And somebody said to me, would you chair it? And I said, okay. So that was a wee bit of a change. So I chaired the burn supper. And it seemed to go down quite well. And then a few months after, I was delighted to say that Archie recovered. And we were in the bar of the old manor. And he's a good old chap. He spoke away like a real old gentleman. And he's sitting at the bar and I said, tell you what, John, he said, you did not a bad job of that. I think you should just do it from here on. And that was me, chairman of the Bridge of Allen Old Manor Burns Club. And that's over 40 years ago.
Okay, let's come back to the burn stuff in a minute or two. We've rushed through that first part of your life. So let's go back to school. And at what age did you discover you were going to be an artist?
I think about 3 or 4. I was always drawing. I always had a pencil in my hand and paper and working away at it. And some of the stuff, when I look back at it, sort of said that's where I was going to go in that direction. So the one thing when I got into advertising, it was always creative. I started in the studio. I got the job into the studio. In fact, it's a strange story because I was going to be quite simply an office boy, which I was 18-year-old by that time. I'd finished school, got my hires on all levels, but I wanted, in fact, I applied for art school and they turned me down. And I remember the letter saying not enough artistic ability, which is something that stuck with me for a long time. But anyway, that was why I wasn't allowed to go into the art school. So I had to go and earn a living, obviously. And then I used to go into the studio. There was a guy called Brian Holden, who was a South African, lovely guy. And he would sit on the other side of the studio. And he let me sit on the opposite side during lunchtime. And I would just draw around a wee bit. So eventually they needed somebody else. So I got to join the studio. And then one day, this is an interesting wee story. I was great at doing cartoons. I always did cartoons. And I drew this strange character. I don't know if you ever read the Mad magazines. Yeah. They had very, very clear and brilliant cartoon illustrations. And I followed those styles a lot. And I did one of this Indian guy with a hat and a feather in it and a very, very elaborate cartoon. And I coloured it in and I came back from lunch one day and found there was a hole cut on the board where I'd drawn this. And the secretary came in and said, Mr. Shields would like to see you, John. And I thought, oh my God, I'm really in trouble here. So I went in and he said, did you draw that? I said, yes. He said, well, I've got a wee interesting idea here. He said, and Bill Sinclair was a guy who worked with us. He said, and he handled all the motor accounts. We had about 50 motor accounts. I can't believe it. The number of motor accounts we had in Glasgow. And we handled Arnold Clark and we handled Ian Philp. And these were the 2 major motor dealers in the city at that time. And he said, could you do a cartoon strip of this? So I said, yes, I certainly would. So I did a cartoon strip for him. And Tommy phoned Arnold Clark and said, I've got this cartoon strip for you. Would you be interested? So they went along and Arnold Clark said, that's fine. So that started me as a cartoon artist, other than the fact that then he came in the next day and said, unfortunately, Bill told Ian Philp that he was going to give him that idea. And I was sold it to Arnold Clark. So can you come up with something else? So I came up with another single cartoon, which I hyphenated cartoon. And I did a cartoon every week. And these 2 came out in the same paper, the Daily Record. And after about 3 weeks, everybody was talking about cartoon and nobody gave a stuff about the other one. So Arnold Clark said, I want it finished this week. So I had an adventure written out for it and I had to finish it in 3 squares, which I did. Arnold Clark leaving over, a drawing of him leaning over a car and grabbing the lump of gold that these 2 guys had gone and got. So that was that. And my salary had gone up while that had happened. And I remember it's the first time I broke 1,000 a year. And that was amazing. As soon as I lost the business for the cartoons, I went straight back down again to what I was before. So that's life. That should have taught me what advertising was going to be about. But I got involved in some tremendous pieces of business in my time. I don't know if you remember Agnew Stores,
Yeah.
the wine and spirit retailer. I came up with the line, will be on my grave somewhere. There's always change at Agnew's. And we used Russell Hunter and Ian Cuthbertson in the filming, and we went over and filmed in America because he brought in the Schlitz brand to this country. So we did that over there and made a film in New York, which was delightful. Did a lot of work for Bank of Scotland for a long time, and Dobbies. A lot of names that were around that are around now and doing good business, but always somehow it came to the wrong end for us because there is no real loyalty in advertising. I'd say that with the exception of two people, Ricky Agnew of Agnew's, who was always very loyal, and Sandy Wilkie of Wiseman Dairies, because he and I worked together for many years in Wiseman. And I remember we brought out the one, he created a 1% milk. And in fact, it's still in the stores now, I can still see it. And we took the Saturday Night Fever, You're the One That I Want, we made the whole commercial around that. And that went well. And then we got the job of organising the Milk Moustache campaign in Scotland. And that was a very successful campaign because totally contrary to everything that happened before, there'd been like a 15% decline in the sales of milk in the previous 10 years. And we put it up 3% in the first year. And it went on to go following that. And I met a lot of very famous people at that time because we just think, who could we get to wear a milk moustache and ask them? Simple as that. I mean, I've always been that way in my life. If you don't ask the question, you don't get the answer. So you might as well do it. So
who was the best at wearing a milk moustache?
I thought Gordon Ramsay was very good. I liked him. I don't think there was a best. I think they were all good fun. And if any of them heard me saying I had chosen the best, I think don't speak to me again. So some of them still do. So I'll probably just leave it there.
Tell me something. When you use a well-known song like the one you were talking about for the one, You're the One That I Want, is it out of copyright? Are you able to use it without permission, or do you have to get all sorts of permissions?
No, in fact, one of the ones we had the biggest success with was when we went and had the milk. I say the Milk Moustache campaign, but it was milk generally in Scotland. And we used ones, Simple Minds, Don't You Forget About Me. And that was a song we used over the American commercial. Guy meets girl in black limousine, big bruiser tries to keep the guy away from her, and then they meet somebody with a glass of milk. And that Don't You Forget About Me went back into the charts again, despite the fact it was probably 6 or 7 years before that. But we had to pay good money for that. And that's just interesting how it happens. Yeah.
You mentioned your father and grandfather being marine engineers down in Greenock. What about your family? Have they followed you?
Thankfully not. My daughter number one has in fact just moved in up the road to Perth with her partner, but she's lived with us ever since then, and she's well past the stage of duking out the door, but she's very happy to have her. We're going to miss her. But she is an artisan. She makes things, and she does a good bit of business going in eBay. But she made some really wonderful jewelry. She was a silversmith, and the most marked thing in her career was she got the job of doing the silverware, all the jewelry for the Ryder Cup when it was at Gleneagles. Wow. Now, the slight problem was they actually took 6 months to decide that she was going to do that, and had done some fantastic designs, and we created a Ryder Cup tartan. And then it came to us and she had something like 6 weeks left to make all the stock on her own to go to Gleneagles, and that finished her with jewelry making. It was very successful, I have to say, because it was beautiful stuff. I've got some of it in the studio I've got here. But that was her. That put her off doing it for herself. So she just wanted to do bits and pieces. But she's a disc jockey on Speyside Radio. Megan's mixtape is what she does, and it's a very popular one. It's a lot of music that she, really hard punk stuff, because she was a punk for quite a long time and went up to Glasgow into the punk area many times at a weekend. We used to worry about her. But
and was her dad a punk in his younger days as well?
no, her dad was a boring person. But it was no, she really is quite a character, and she also had, at the same time as the program was going out in Speyside, it was going out in Catalina Island in California. So she's got a following over there as well, which is amazing.
Tremendous.
And my other daughter, Erica, is a zookeeper, and she's been on television quite a few programs on the Edinburgh Zoo, and she's featured in that. She's also a bit of a thespian. She played Mary Queen of Scots at the Linlithgow Palace, and she's appeared in TV commercials. And she's quite a character. Her big job at the moment is looking after the sloths. So nothing unusual there, I say. And she's got two great kids, little Katie and Ali, and they're both going to be athletic geniuses. And Ali already, he's 12 and he beats me at chess. So that's a bit humiliating. But you don't mind your grandson being better than you.
Very good. And you better give their mum a mention as well.
Well, I was going to go on to that, because one thing that we did down about 1980s, beginning of the 1980s, we decided to open an art shop and an art gallery and gift shop. I say we decided to open it. We found one in the corner of the square at Dunblane, and it was Cornerstone Gallery. And in fact, I wouldn't be here and with so many other things now if it hadn't been for that. So we bought the company, and we enjoyed our time there. And this is where one of the kind of amazing things happened, is that one day a young artisan came in, long flowing blonde hair, big tall guy, with a waistcoat, leather waistcoat. And I said, "Hi, are you interested in this?" And he put on the counter a pewter chess set, which he had designed and made, a fantasy chess set that had goblins and wizards and things. And every single piece in the set was different. And I was absolutely stunned by that. And it was beautiful work, a real delightful guy. We sold quite a few of them. And then a few years before that, when I was with a company called Woolward Droids in Edinburgh, they had a house in Estepona in the south of Spain. And we used to be allowed to go out there for a week for the summer. And I was out there wondering what I was going to read, because I like to read if I'm doing sunbathing. And I looked along the bookshelves, and there was the second book of the Nigel Tranter trilogy, Robert the Bruce. It was Steps to the Empty Throne, and it culminated in Bannockburn. And it was a wonderful book. I'd never read anything like it, because he writes in dialogue. In fact, people used to say to the Tranter, "How do you know they said that way?" And he used to say, "How do you know they don't or didn't?" So he was good at looking after himself. He was one of life's gentlemen, I have to say, a wonderful guy. But I then had a thought, to cut a long story short, I went back to Glasgow, and the first thing I did from my return from Estepona was go along to W.H. Smith and bought books 1 and 3 of the trilogy and read the whole trilogy to cover, a wonderful book. So when Steve Trickett was his name, the artist, came in and showed me this, a few weeks later, I was thinking, why don't we do a Bannockburn chess set? And why not do one? Every single piece would be different. And on the principle I mentioned to you a wee while ago, if you don't ask, you don't get, I phoned Nigel Tranter. And I said, "Would you be interested in doing this?" And he said, "Of course I would." And he wouldn't take a penny for it.
Wow.
And it took us 2 years to do it. And he introduced us to a young guy called Andrew Spratt, who was a costume historian. And he designed every single chess piece. He did drawings, color drawings or line drawings, and even down to what the buckle was and the swivel on a helmet or something. Every detail was there, right down to the last detail. We gave that to Steve Trickett, and he came back with used a material called milliput, and it was for clay making. And then when it dried hard as a bone. And he'd bring the figures in, and I would take them to Nigel, probably 3 or 4 pieces at a time, and we'd sit there and talk about it, compare it with the drawings, he would have his thought. And before that, of course, he and I had decided who was going to be the player, who were going to be the players on each side. And it was really, really important to get that story out. And then we produced the Nigel Tranter's Bannockburn chess set. And we took it to down to the NEC, down to the retail show there. And the first Bannockburn chess set was bought by Walt Disney.
Oh, excellent.
These 2 people come onto the stand and said, what's this here? They said, this is the Bannockburn chess set. You're going to tell me the story of the Bannockburn chess set? So we told them the story. And they said, this is great. We're going to have one. And we're going to take it to the Epcot Centre in Disney World. And they bought that set and they took it to the Epcot Centre. I don't know if it's still there or not, but that was our first set. That was unfortunately the pinnacle, because everything else after that was a bit less ordinary. But and that was Cornerstone. So Cornerstone Gallery started us on that route. We eventually closed it in Dunblane because the footfall wasn't what we needed. And we went to, we were offered a really great place in Stirling at the top of Broad Street, just opposite Mars Walk, just on the way up to the castle. Yep. It was an old building and it was converted for us, and they built a conservatory at the back for a cafe. And we named that Cornerstone Gallery. And that, unfortunately, after about 1.5 years, they put down double yellow lines all the way down Broad Street on both sides, and that was us almost scuppered. We used to do lots of painting exhibitions, 1 a month, and we used to get a lot of people in for that. But getting footfall was not easy, because people went past us to the castle in buses and cars and all the rest of it. So we ended up going out to Sterling Furniture, and we had a stand out there for a while, and that was, we've decided after a while we'd had enough of that, and that's the way it was going to be. One of the interesting things was when my last agency ceased business, and that's another story for another day, but I was thinking what I was going to do, and I got a call from Jim McCall, the Scottish billionaire, and he said, how would you like to come and help me? I'm going to take over Ferguson Marine Shipyard in Port Glasgow, which is gone into administration, and I think we can do something with it. So I then spent the next 5.5 years as business development director there, and we did some amazing things in that time. There's so many things you read these days that are just completely untrue. And it was a great change for the River Clyde. If things that happened at the end of there, when Jim McCall was taken out of there and we were all sent on our way, had not happened, we would now be building Type 31E frigates. We'd be building fishing boats for the Scottish fishing fleet. We'd be doing a lot more than has been done at the moment. But the one thing I had in that was the great pleasure of that, because you somehow feel slightly guilty when you come from a hardworking engineering family. My father and his uncles were all in the war. They all served in the merchant fleet, and that was a thing to behold when you couldn't even sit behind a gun. You had to go down below decks and take whatever was happening. And my grandfather before them was the guy who started it all. And he was going off to be in advertising. But to come back and to work in the shipyards and to get out there every day and to talk to these guys and to get up on the vessels, to get into it, not knowing what I was doing half the time, but nonetheless, what I could do on the other side of things was that old thing I mentioned earlier, ask and you might get. And we asked a heck of a lot and we got a lot, but it didn't work out in the end. But I tell you what, the fat lady hasn't sung yet. What's his face?
And that allowed you to come full circle from where your father and grandfather started.
It was fantastic to do that, because we left Greenock, went to Bridge of Allan, and went to a different life. I spent all my life in Glasgow and Edinburgh, and we only occasionally came down to the Clyde. And suddenly I was getting into the car at 5:30 in the morning in Bridge of Allan and driving to Port Glasgow, and then getting into the car at 7 o'clock at night and driving to Bridge of Allan, and it was wonderful. And coming down in a summer's morning, coming down over that hill towards Port Glasgow and looking out towards the Clyde, it was just magnificent. And excellent. Yeah, it was a happy, happy time. And very strange, because completely alien to everything I've been doing. other than business development, but being in that environment, and it was great, and the people were great. I used to produce the magazine. Didn't produce it, that's unfair. I did a lot of work on the 242 magazine, which was also sold at that time, and it was an interesting time, that.
Well, I've got a collection of about 10 of these magazines in my
All
loft.
the cartoons and that, I did them.
That's tremendous.
And I did, in fact, I remember doing one particular one, which was a full page, which was the photographs of everybody, including the, can't remember the disc jockey now, the one that was the main one there, but Kathy Spence, who was the secretary of Tommy Shields, she was there. Tommy was there, his photograph. I must have it somewhere. But yeah, that was reproduced in one of the magazines. So when you go home tonight, check out your group and see if you've got a there. And it was actually based on the boat, and everybody was hanging off the ramparts.
Yeah, I can remember it. I can visualize that image. So that's amazing. And you also mentioned Roundtable. So yes. I just need to ask you a little bit about Roundtable, because quite a lot of our members at New Cumnock are former tablers. Yep. So you were what, Bridge of Allen table?
I was Bridge of Allen and District Roundtable. I was chairman of that, and I was also chairman of Area 51.
Yeah.
And I was chairman of the National Conference in 1983, which was held in Edinburgh at Ingleston, and we did all the work on that. In fact, we built. This was an amazing thing that happened. I think it nearly put somebody out of business. This is the reason people don't ask me to do a lot of things, because I do things that turn out to be quite dangerous. I said, we're going to take over Ingleston, take over the hall in Ingleston. Why don't we build Edinburgh inside Ingleston? And you know that there was one company, the boy in the round table, who built the entire facade of old Edinburgh, right round the entire spread of Ingleston, with lights in behind it and everything. And on stage, we had a rampart with a castle behind it, and Gary Glitter came out from the hole in the castle behind a pipe band. We used to organise things like that, and I did a turn as Jimmy McJimmy to 3,500 people at the conference as well. That conference was amazing. That was 4 or 5 days. I'll never forget, because in fact I'll never remember properly, because I didn't have any sleep in that time. But we did amazing things with the round table.
And you mentioned that Roundtable got you into Burns, and you get involved in the Old Manor Burns Supper. So yes. I think that's a great point for us to move over and get to talk a bit about your interest in Burns, and I'll get Jim to lead the question in that.
Mm-hmm.
John, I'm just amazed at your cerebral adeptness here, because I'm just thinking, whenever you said Simple Minds and you picked that particular song for an American launch, that was the song that launched that group in America in a movie called The Breakfast Club, which is still a fantastic film if you ever watch it. However, what's your first contact with Burns?
I think the first contact was probably through Roundtable, going to a Roundtable Burns Supper. And for the shame of me, I can't remember which Burns Supper it would be, but I enjoyed it so much. I said, I was program convener, and I got us into a lot of trouble doing that as well. We started many things that took a lot of time and a lot of effort out of our lives, but we made a lot of money for people too. And I said, we've got to have our own Burns Supper. So we started that. And then I went along to the Old Manor Burns Supper, and then Archie had his turn. And from that moment on, my life was dedicated to Burns in that way. But the one thing about Burns is it's not superficial for me. It is absolutely inherent. The number of things that I do and the places I go where Burns has a hand in it. And I was thinking today about the number of things, the recitations that I do, Holy Willie and Tam O'Shanter and the Cotta Saturday Night, and how these spread such a variety of life and a variety of texture, political, good humor, love, hate, passion. You can't get into that stuff and not be taken away with it. And that was when the Bannockburn chess set was going along, I thought, I can't go through life and have a piece of stone above me somewhere without having created a Robert Burns chess set. And that was probably, Nigel Tranter was a great pleasure in doing the Bannockburn chess set, but just Burns and the whole entity of it was a great pleasure in doing that chess set. And I could probably do another one because there were enough characters there. I have 32 different ones in the Burns chess set, but I could do enough characters to do another one after that, because Burns is just so fantastic. And the one thing I like about Burns is I suppose the one thing about Scotch is there's almost so much pathos in us, whether we're being mugged at football or whether we're just can't see something without greeting. He's got so many words and so many things that can touch on that, because when I get to my funeral, someone's going to have to do some Burns. So I'll be listening. So I'll put that in the will somewhere that someone's got to do it. But it just envelops you. I think you'll know that yourself, Jim, just the way it goes.
How did you get started with recitations?
Well, I'll tell you what it was. It was Tam Punter, because we had this Burns supper we were doing, and I thought, I'm going to do a parody of that thing, which I'd only heard a couple of times. So I read it a few times. And you know, I wrote Tam Punter in an afternoon, and it was about a third of the length of Tam O'Shanter. So I read it that night. I didn't recite it because I could have done that. But it has developed now, and over the decades, it's now the same length as Tam O'Shanter, and it's better than it was when it started. But when I did that, people started to ask me to do it, so then I had to learn it. But then when I learned it, I thought, I really enjoy that. So I was keen to do more. So I learned Holy Willie, which I liked. And then I thought I'd tackle something. If I can do Tam O'Shanter, I could do something as long as that. And I do the Twa Dugs. And a very good friend of mine died last year from COVID. And he was Louis and I was Caesar, just because I was big and he was a wee guy. And we actually created two dogs' heads, which I got done by the BBC costume department, which we had a hairy chin each we put on with a strap. So when we moved our mouths, you could see it, and the top of the dogs came down to there. So we talked, it was as though we were, and we could just see out the eyes, and we'd talk away to each other. We did that recitation, we loved that. The one I do like the best, I think, is Cotter Saturday Night, because I think it covers every possible aspect of humanity. It's really wonderful. And then the one thing I stopped at was Death and Dr. Holbrook, because I heard somebody else doing it and I thought, well, it's interesting. I tried to learn it. I just wasn't interested. And I thought, that's what it is. If you're interested in something, then that will take you all the way you need to get there. If you're not interested, there's no point. That's why at school, teaching kids stuff they're not interested in about is just about as fruitless as you can get. Get a hold of what people like, and then that's what they'll respond to.
You talked about Tam the Punter, which is your own creation. Going to give us a taste of that, because I've never heard it.
Yeah, I'll give you a taste of it, because I can't give you the whole thing, because you'd have to put your hands over the ears of some people to do it. But that's only occasionally. When chanting Billy's tack the street and Parkhead Tims they go to greet, with lovely brother long forgotten, they meet to thump each other rotten, while we sit boozing in a sarry, getting fou with Uncle Harry. We think no of the long Scotch miles or the gutters of the dugship piles that lie between us and our hame, where sits our silky sillen dame, with a voice that would cut you to the bone and a chin that's made for chiseling stone. This truth fund honest Tam Punter, is he for the governing the canter. All govern, ne'er a tune surpasses for Neds and Hoors and stupid asses. Oh, Tam. I know about being so wise as, no, instead of going on a bender, had I listened to the Rene wife singer. She told the wheel there was a rascal, a blithering, bristling, drunken arsehole, that from November to October, Friday night there wasn't a sober. Every goal by Kenny Miller there sat as long as thou had siller. Every nag that won a race, the smith and knee off your face. And at the kirk on a Sunday, Hey, you necked a bucky wine till Monday. She prophesied it later soon. You'd be found deep drowned and doon beside the fishes, or kicked to death among the bushes. Oh, gentle dames that gars me greet. To think how many counsels sweet, how many lengthened heartfelt censures grow the heeds of those that's meant for. Oh, aye, but to our tale. And I'll probably stop there because it's quite long. If you like, I could skip to the end.
Well,
Let's have the last couple of verses.
I've got it. There's one bit I better explain though, because if I don't do this bit, you'll not get it, right? So this is the next bit. So they've been out in the street, they've been thrown out and they're propped against a nearby car singing their stories, and it's pouring with rain. Well, but now the wind was blowing worse and but now the rain was blowing worse and the driving rain made Tam feel worse. So bidding suit her a fond farewell, he turned upon his platform heel and called her up against the night, stoated blindly out of sight. Now he'd only got a block or two when he realised he was our fool, to mark the long miles back to his close when the strangest scent came to his nose. He staggered back to find the hum was coming from a donkey's bum, where he in all his drunken haste had promptly buried half his face. Ah, man, never daunted was your Tam. He leapt upon the beastie's bam, till sair admonished with hand and feet, the donkey took off down the street. In no time at all, they were past the flicks, where Mungo's mother lost her nicks, and past the home of Aggie Lily, who slammed her door in a flasher's willy, and on beyond the famous close, where Donald Trump caught a doze. Oh, they'd gone well over half a mile, and most of that in frantic style, when in the dark he spied a glow, and at once the beast began to slow. A chink of light, and that was all, was coming from the Govan Hall.
Oh, very good.
Just to get back to Burns, and seriously at the moment, you must have been at an awful lot of Burns suppers in your time, in one form or another. Have you any highlights that you could regale us with?
Yes, I have, and it's a very selfish one, because I chaired our 50th anniversary Burns supper at the Great Hall in Stirling Castle in 2019. And thank God it was 2019 and not 2020, because we wouldn't have had it. But that was just amazing. We had 380 people in the Great Hall. We did it in banquet style, which is the way I prefer to lay a Burns supper out, not round tables, but banquet style. So everybody can look up the edge rather than having people spin round. And the Great Hall was terrific for that. So we had the reception in the Chapel Royal, and we all went through to the Great Hall. We had video cameras all around to make sure that everybody saw things like that. We had a piper that we used to play for us, now lived in Australia, and we got him to do a video. We put him up, and he was in the sunset in Australia, and he turned away, and when he walked off, he was actually naked, and I didn't see that until I saw that. So we got a good laugh there. It was a wonderful thing. We raised a lot of money for charities. But it was great to be chairman of something like that was just wonderful. And I actually, to be quite honest, nearly every Burns supper I've been to has been wonderful, because they're all wonderful in their own way. That has spectacle. That was big, and that's what made it really special. There have been quite a few others. In fact, when I had my advertising agency, I had an accountant called Jim Campbell, who was quite a rotund gentleman, and so I got a black wig and got him a school cap and a school uniform. And I started in the Merchants Hall, the Fat Bob and Soapy Suitors Braw Burns supper. And I chaired that as Fat Bob and as Soapy Suitor, and he was my Fat Bob to that. And we had all our clients along to that. And that was a great laugh. And DC Thompson were terrific. They gave us all the cartoon stuff we used in the programs on the tables. And we had a Bruins theme through the whole thing. So that was very memorable. I'd forgotten about that. How can I say that I'm memorable and forgotten about it? But we had 3 years of Fat Bob and Soapy Suitors Braw Burns supper, and it just got better and better. So we've done some interesting things with it. It was really, really nice. And of course, I do a lot of immortal memories and toast the lasses, and I know, because I'm probably good value, because I give recitations as well, so it saves them getting somebody else involved.
Just another wee question about just interest. Do you have a favourite character or you know, piece of Burns's work at all?
Well, I think Tam O'Shanter has to be my favourite, just because I think the story is wonderful, and of course he's turned into Tam Punter for me, so he tends to be the one who pervades that. I love the Cotter and the Cotter Saturday Night. I think that's wonderful, and of course Holy Willie is just majestic. We've got, I don't know if I can show you this. I'll see if you've got it, if you can see it well enough. It goes back to my trick of asking people without necessarily knowing what the answer was going to be. That there is a painting by Peter Howson of Holy Willie. Actually, it looks as though it's me because I can see my shoulders on it. I asked him if I could use that painting to illustrate, because what I did was for this book, I got all the characters were illustrated by famous paintings, or I got someone to do a painting for me. And I don't know if you know the painting of Peter Howson did of Burns. It's called Burns Revealed. And it's actually quite a dramatic painting because it shows all the angst and all the anxiety and the illness he had at the end of his life. So I like Holy Willie for lots of different reasons, and it's good to have something. And then I was a bit irreverent, a bit cheeky with that, because that's a painting of Holy Willie with a dog collar. And of course, he was an elder, he wasn't a cleric. Yeah. And he had another one of Holy Willie without the dog collar. I said, no, I want the dog collar. Because again, I'm good at making comments and things, which is not necessarily to my benefit most of the time. But I'll just read you what I said about this. I said, Peter Howson is never far from controversy, and nowhere more so than in this depiction of Holy Willie. Willie Fisher was not a cleric, but painting him as such might suggest that those who turn a blind eye to the actions of those who purport to serve them may find themselves painted with the same brush. So I thought it was great to show him like that, because it did reflect the hypocrisy that Burns despised in so many elements of the church in those days. Somebody asked me the other day, said, was Robert Burns religious? I said, you know, it's difficult to actually tell. He must have been to a degree, but then he didn't like religion. And I think there is actually a difference between the two, because religion is represented by the people who do whatever they, I mean, it's like so many extreme religions. The religions are maybe not, the religious aspect of it is maybe not the thing that's wrong. It's the people who try and punt it.
Well, you've tantalised us mentioning the chess set, and you've just shown us a book there. Can you maybe explain if there's a relationship between the two and tell us about the chess set?
Yes, the book, I decided that I had to have a Robert Burns chess set. That was going to be the case. And in the Bannockburn one, we had a booklet, which had the 2 chapters from Path of the Hero King, which related to the Bannockburn battle. Unfortunately, when Nigel passed away, his estate stopped us using that, so we had to come up with another booklet. But I have to have a booklet for Burns, and I wanted it to be better than anything I've done before. So that was a booklet. Then there had to be music, and when we started with it, I gave away 3 CDs with the set. They were by Lismore, and it was Robert Burns the music, Robert Burns the songs, and Robert Burns the words. And when I went back to relaunch the chess set, because we launched it 6-7 years ago, did nothing with it, and the last few years when I was with Ferguson Marine and doing everything else, it went by the board. So we're now back to relaunching it. And I went back and said, right, I'd like to buy some of these CDs. And Lismore had gone out of business. And the albums had moved over to another company, Threads of Sound. So I said, right, I need to produce these for the chess set. And they said, fine. And we just talked about it and decided what the price would be, and we'd do it in our own design. And then just as a matter of passing, I said, well, what's the expected life of CDs? He said, oh, about 2020. So he's saying this year, during COVID, what's happened is we've now got retailers turning around to music producers and saying, do you want your CDs back, or will we bin them? Because what has happened during COVID is that streaming has taken over from CDs, just as CDs took over from cassettes. So what I am going to do now is produce, and I didn't realize I could do this, I can produce a Robert Burns chess set playlist. And I can pick any piece of music by anybody in the world. And I don't have to ask for permission, and I don't have to pay for it, because what I'm doing is promoting their work, and they get paid for it when I do it. So I found Paolo Nutini at a concert doing A Man's a Man for All That, and he was fantastic with all the anger that I thought that Burns must have had when he was writing it. I'm also possibly going to put Bob Dylan in Highlands, because he wrote that after he read My Heart's in the Highlands, because of course he has a place. We sometimes go up to Nethy Bridge and he has a place up there, and he was well into Burns. In fact, he said that he started writing when he read My Love Is Like a Red, Red Rose, and it was Robert Burns that inspired Bob Dylan. So the only trouble is it's 16 minutes long, his Highlands. It doesn't say much about the deer. So I don't know, we might put it at the end of the playlist, otherwise people might switch off. So we're going to do that and have a page for each of the artists and the music. And it's going to be as different kind of music as I can possibly get. And a lot of the people that we use in our own Burns suppers, who are not famous, but I think are absolutely stellar, we're going to use them in that. We'll publish it and we'll put it in with a chess set, and we'll also send it out to people. So that had to be the whole group of things together. The chess set itself, wonderful, wonderful characters. It just has so much great pleasure in putting that together. And the one thing I did do, and this is where, again, sometimes you don't always do it right. The first time I had 2 rooks in the chess set, and I suddenly realized I didn't have Burns Cottage. And that's right, I've got to replace a rook for Burns Cottage, but here, I haven't done Kirk Alloway either. So I then had to get 2 more done. And it was Steve Trickett that did this chess set as well. And you know, he died the year after it. We did the last pieces of the chess set, put it together, and within 6 months he was away. So that was Nigel Tranter's away, and Steve Trickett's away. So I'm watching the buses when I cross the road.
So can you let us see some of the pieces of the chess set?
Yes, I can. Very briefly, I'll show you this. I'll do this. I'll bring it up to a better one there. That's wrong. Oh no, we're going to put it in front of me there so you see it. No, I'm better this way, right? This is Robert Burns.
Very good.
The only way I can do it is maybe get rid of that background. But anyway,
yeah.
That's that. It's probably not, you don't need to doubt that much detail. There's Nanny with a tail, and there's poor Tam O'Shanter as a knight disappearing over the bridge on the other side. And here's one of the ironies of the chess set, because there's Robert Burns. He's on the dark side as a knight, as the exciseman. So there you go, closing a circle for him. And then, of course, who else would be a bishop, but wee Holy Willie. So that's a wee selection. But I'll show you the one I spoke about. There's Burns Cottage, and there's the old Kirk, and that's we've got Nanny running around the edge of that one, and we've got the mouse and the all the others on that too. And that's another one that I love doing, is the mouse. We do it with Alistair MacDonald, you know, the Scottish folk singer. She sings a Cold Blast, 2 verses, and I come in and do 4 verses of the mouse. He comes back in and does the Cold Blast, and then I finish the mouse, and then he finishes it. Because I think that, again, is one of the most beautiful pieces of poetry that you can imagine, because there's a whole life story in there. And that to me is just a wonder of the man, that he could touch so many hearts with things.
Yeah.
One of the great pleasures in doing the set was we first made the set, we bought from a chess supplier, wooden chess boards that we do. And I thought, this is really doing a disservice to that set, because the Bannockburn chess set has all inlaid with thistles and roses in pewter. So what I did was decide to make all the white squares in the chess set a line from Burns' poems and songs. And each one is an individual one, although some of them meander across the board. Maybe in one song, you get continuous reading for it. And sometimes I've challenged my little grandson. I say, you're only 12 now, son, but what you're going to have to do is when you land in one of these squares is recite the piece of poetry that it represents. So to try and get that nice and authentic, I thought, I don't want to make it just an ordinary typeface. So I'll try and find a handwriting one just so it'll look better. And then I discovered that the National Trust had commissioned a Robert Burns font in his handwriting. So I now have that on my laptop and I can sit and write letters in Robert Burns handwriting. So on these squares, each one of them has the wording in his writing. And it's an aluminium edge to it. It's a very heavy thing. Don't let the wife throw that at you. But altogether, it makes it quite a heavy set and quite dramatic. And it needs to be that for the man it's there to commemorate.
Yeah, very good. And you need to explain the background you're using, because you know, you selected that because you had done your filming.
I selected that because I'll switch back to the other one in a minute or two. But when we first did the chess sets, and why it's so different now is that the internet was a boy. And we sold a lot of chess sets, mostly through the Wallace Monument, as it happened, strangely enough. But that's another story. Nowadays, we're into a different setup, and social marketing is so important. So we're going to do a lot of video. So I, again, doing the question of asking and getting, I contacted the Globe Inn and said, look, that was Burns' house in his latter years. I would like to come and film some stuff down there. So I've done some recitations. Alistair did some songs with me down there. And we're looking, I think we're going to do a Burns supper from there next year. Quite a big idea we've got for it, but we're going to see how that works out. So I took a lot of photographs when I was down, and instead of you seeing where I work, which is in here in the unit where we produce the chess sets, I thought it'd be nicer if you think I lived in a nice place like this. So, and to tell you what, if you haven't been to Burns' house, and I'm sure a lot of people out there have not been, have heard of it, because I hadn't been till I did this. If you go to the Globe Inn and go down and see that, that is one of the most beautiful places you can imagine. And just to think that Robert Burns and his cronies was there. And there's a bedroom upstairs, which the landlady will tell you about. But I would say Robert occasionally had a little diversion when he went for a drink there. So
I shout out to David Dawson for the work he's done down there in the Globe, and of course the wonderful and only Jane Brown, who gives the tours. She's just one of the world's great people.
Jane is wonderful. I'm actually going to do some work with Jane, hopefully quite soon. And David, yes, I mean, he's a great whiskey man. You know, I was going to get some sponsorship for something that he was doing for whiskey. He said, no, he said, I've got more whiskey. But no, it's a great setup down there.
Excellent. You gave us an image of Holy Willie from the chess set. How about finishing off this episode with a few verses from Holy Willie's prayer?
Yes, I'd quite like to do that. O thou that in the heavens dost dwell, who as it pleases best himself sends ain to heaven and 10 to hell, all for thy glory and no for any good or ill I've done for thee. I bless and praise thy matchless might. When thousands hours left in night, that I am here before thy sight for gifts and grace, a burning and a shining light to all this place. What was I of my generation that I should get such exaltation? I who deserve such just damnation for broken laws, about 6,000 years of my creation, your Adam's cause. When frae my mother's womb I fell, thou might have plunged me deep in hell to weep and wail and gnash my gums in burning lakes. What damned devils roar and yell, chained to their stakes. But I am here, a chosen sample, show thy grace is great and ample. I'm here, a pillar of thy temple, strong as a rock, a guide, a buckler and example to all thy flock. There you go.
Well done.
That does it.
Anyway, that was great. So just leaves me with the honour of saying to you, thanks very much for telling us about your life with Robert Burns. Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.
And thank you. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Good to meet you.